At 17, my parents signed papers to legally give me away. 15 years later, they walked into a Seattle high-rise conference room and tried to take back a $28.4 million estate they never built. They accused me of manipulating the man who adopted me, filed a lawsuit, and even tried to freeze my company's assets. What they did not expect was that every document, every signature, and every secret from 2010 was still waiting in a sealed court file. My name is Adeline Callahan, and this is what happened when the daughter they abandoned became the sole heir they could not control. Chapter 1. I could tell Monica Whitmore had practiced her face in a mirror. The softened mouth, the careful shine at the edge of her eyes, the slight tilt of her head that said wounded without saying responsible. She sat across from me in a glass conference room on the 42nd floor of Columbia Center like she had every right to be there. It was March 10, 2025. Seattle was gray and wet beyond the windows. Inside, the air felt tight. My legal name was Adeline Callahan. That was the name on the adoption decree filed in King County Superior Court in 2012. In business, I still signed as Addie Whitmore. Whitmore Commercial Holdings was a brand I had rebuilt from the ground up, and I refused to let my past own that name. On my side of the table sat Evelyn Hart, my Uncle Ben's estate attorney. Next to her was Nina Alvarez, our COO, sharp and steady. George Patel, our longtime auditor, folded his hands in front of him. Dr. Rachel Kim from Seattle Children's Foundation sat slightly back, a quiet witness to what was about to become less about charity and more about blood. Across from us sat Monica and Thomas Whitmore, my biological parents, and their attorney, Daniel Crowley. Daniel did not bother with pleasantries. He leaned forward and said, "We have filed a will contest. The grounds are undue influence." He said it smoothly, as if he were announcing a zoning adjustment instead of accusing me of manipulating the man who saved me. My pulse ticked up, but I kept my expression still. Daniel continued, "On March 5, 2025, we also filed a petition requesting a temporary freeze of certain estate assets pending judicial review." Temporary freeze. The phrase landed hard. Even though Evelyn had warned me, hearing it spoken in front of my executive team and a foundation representative made the threat tangible. Nina's phone buzzed. She glanced down and her jaw tightened. She angled the screen toward me just enough for me to read, "The bank is requesting ownership verification on the revolving credit line. They cite the contest filing." The freeze petition had not been ruled on yet, but the ripple had already started. Monica leaned forward, voice low and careful. "Addie, we never wanted this. We just want what is fair. Your uncle would have wanted his family treated fairly." Fair. Family. I met her eyes. I did not call her mom. I did not give her anything she could use. Evelyn spoke before I did. The will was executed in June 2024 with independent counsel and proper witnesses. There is no evidence of undue influence. A petition has been filed. The court has not granted any freeze. The reading will proceed. Daniel smiled thinly. "The petition is on record. The court will evaluate the likelihood of success and potential risk to estate assets. My clients are immediate family members of the deceased." Evelyn did not flinch. "Standing is a legal question," she said. "It will be addressed in court. This meeting is to read the will." George Patel cleared his throat softly. "From an accounting perspective, there is no indication of mismanagement or unusual transfers in the final months." That mattered. In a contest based on undue influence, patterns and paper trails mattered more than emotion. Dr. Kim remained composed, hands folded in her lap. I wondered what she thought, watching a woman claim moral high ground after signing papers 15 years ago that severed me from her life. Daniel shifted in his chair. "For the record," he said, "my clients intend to assert their rights fully." Monica nodded, lips pressed tight, as if bravery were a performance. Evelyn opened the first folder. The sound of paper sliding against paper felt loud in the silence. She began with formalities: the declaration of sound mind, the revocation of prior wills, the confirmation of execution before witnesses. Then she moved to the assets. Whitmore Commercial Holdings currently holds 14 commercial properties located in Seattle and Bellevue, Washington. As of January 2025, the portfolio is valued at approximately $28.4 million, with an average occupancy rate of 94%. The numbers settled into the room like a weight. Thomas's eyes widened before he caught himself. Monica's fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Daniel's expression sharpened, professional interest replacing moral language. I'd watched that shift in boardrooms before. Money stripped the pretense. Evelyn continued, listing properties: medical offices in Bellevue, retail space in Ballard, a renovated mixed-use building in Capitol Hill that Ben had purchased in the early 90s when no one believed in that block yet. Monica interrupted softly. Benjamin loved his family. Evelyn did not pause. She turned a page. Thomas leaned forward. Are you suggesting I have no claim here? Evelyn met his gaze calmly. The will references a personal loan extended to you in 2002 in the amount of $80,000. There is no documented repayment. The testator cites that and long-standing estrangement in his determination. Thomas's face flushed. That was between brothers. George spoke quietly. The records are clear. Daniel leaned in. We dispute characterization of any outstanding obligation, and again, my clients are immediate family members of the deceased. Evelyn's voice remained level. Immediate family in common language is not the same as legal standing. That issue will be decided by the court. As of today, this will stands as written. The room felt smaller. I kept my hands folded in my lap. The urge to defend myself rose and fell like a wave. I had learned, slowly, painfully, that silence could be stronger than explanation. When Daniel's name had first come up weeks earlier, something in my memory had clicked. Ben had mentioned him once, back in 2009, said he had met with him about estate structuring and decided not to move forward. Not my kind of attorney, Ben had said. Not the right fit. I did not know then whether that detail would matter. I only know it had lodged somewhere in my mind. Evelyn turned another page. She read the clause excluding Thomas from distribution. She read it without emotion, citing debt, estrangement, and intent. Thomas clenched his jaw. Monica's hand settled on his arm, not in comfort, but in control. Daniel tried again. We believe Mr. Callahan was isolated from his biological family in the final months. Evelyn responded immediately. Mr. Callahan continued regular contact with multiple business associates and legal counsel. There is no evidence of isolation. There are witnesses to his independent decision-making. I felt Nina's presence beside me like an anchor. We had spent the last week reviewing emails, board minutes, hospital visitor logs. Everything was documented. The contest was not just emotional, it was strategic. A freeze, even temporary, could shake lender confidence, it could rattle tenants, it could force a settlement. That was the leverage. Monica's voice softened again. Addie, we never wanted this. We just want what is fair. Your uncle would have wanted his family treated fairly. There it was. Not an apology, not a memory, a negotiation framed as reconciliation. I met her eyes. Evelyn is handling it. Nothing more. Evelyn's finger traced down the page in front of her. She said, the following provisions pertain specifically to Adeline. The room went completely still. Even the city noise outside felt distant. Thomas stared at Evelyn as if he could will the words back into her mouth. Daniel lifted his pen, ready. Monica's breath caught in her throat. Under the table, my fingers pressed into my palm hard enough to ground me. Evelyn looked down at the document, then up at the room. She drew in a steady breath and began to read the first line of the clause that would determine exactly who Ben believed I was. Chapter 2. Her voice carried across the room, calm and precise. But before the words could settle, my mind had already traveled 15 years back to a different August, a different room, a different version of myself who still believed that love could be negotiated. Portland in late summer always smelled faintly of dry grass and warm asphalt. I was 17, sunburned from biking to the library every afternoon, and holding an envelope that felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. Oregon State University, Summer STEM Scholars Program, full scholarship. I remember standing in our kitchen with the envelope open, rereading the acceptance letter for the third time. It said I had been selected from over 2,000 applicants. It said tuition, housing, materials covered. It said, "Congratulations." For one afternoon, I allowed myself to imagine a future that did not depend on anyone else's approval. Monica came home around 5. She dropped her purse on the counter and saw the letter in my hands. "What is that?" she asked. I told her. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it lifted at the edges. I told her about the labs, about staying on campus, about how it would look on college applications. She listened without smiling. Lauren came down the stairs halfway through my explanation. She was 2 years older than me, already talking about applying to art programs out of state. She leaned against the banister, arms folded, expression unreadable. When I finished, Monica wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, "That is wonderful, Addie." Then she paused. "We need to talk about timing." The talk happened that night at the dining table. Thomas sat at the head, as always, newspaper folded beside his plate. Monica explained that Lauren had been accepted to a summer arts intensive in Santa Barbara. It was not fully funded. It was important for her portfolio. It would help her future. "We cannot afford both," Monica said. I stared at her. "Mine is a full scholarship," I said. "It does not cost you anything." "There is still expenses," she replied. "Travel, spending money, and we need to support your sister. She has worked so hard." I felt something inside me shift. I had worked hard too. I always worked hard. I just did it quietly. "You were good at adapting," Monica said. "Lauren needs this more." I do not remember raising my voice. I remember saying no. I said, "I earned this. I want to go." Thomas did not look at me. He turned a page in his newspaper. Lauren did not defend me. She did not have to. The room already knew how this would end. For 3 days, the house felt brittle. Conversation stopped when I entered a room. Doors closed more firmly than usual. On the third afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and saw 2 suitcases sitting by the front door. Monica stood in the hallway. Her expression was not angry, it was resolved. "Your Uncle Ben has agreed to take you in," she said. "It will be better for everyone. You need structure. He can give you opportunities we cannot." I looked past her at Thomas. He adjusted the cuff of his shirt. He did not meet my eyes. Lauren stood halfway up the stairs, one hand on the railing. Our eyes met for a second. She looked away first. I waited on the front porch for 4 hours. The sun went down. The street light flickered on. No one came out to sit with me. No one brought me water. When Ben's sedan finally pulled into the driveway, I was curled on top of my suitcase to keep warm. He stepped out, took one look at my face, and pulled me into his arms without asking questions. "From now on," he said, "you have a home." I did not know then that inside the house, during that same week, paperwork was being drafted. In September 2010, Monica and Thomas signed documents at the Multnomah County Family Court voluntarily terminating their parental rights. They cited financial hardship and the desire to provide me with stability under Ben's guardianship. A judge reviewed the petition. It was approved. The order was entered into record. I did not sit in that courtroom. I did not sign anything. I was 17, sleeping in a spare bedroom in Seattle, trying to memorize bus routes and not cry at night. What I did know was that Ben helped me enroll in a local high school for my senior year. What I did not know was that legally, my parents had already severed the tie they would later claim was sacred. They framed it as generosity, as giving me a better chance, but the language of the order was clear: termination of parental rights. Voluntary. Signed. Ben never told me the details at first. He said only that everything was handled, that I did not need to worry about being sent back. I signed my enrollment forms at my new school with shaky hands. I unpacked my clothes into drawers that smelled of cedar instead of dust. I took the ferry once just to see the water stretch out under the gray sky, to remind myself that the world was larger than one street in Portland. In May 2012, after I turned 19 and had completed my first year at the University of Washington, Ben asked me to come with him to the King County Superior Court. We sat in a quiet hallway outside a courtroom. He held a manila envelope on his lap. "What is this?" I asked. "Just paperwork," he said, making things official. The adoption hearing was brief. The judge asked me if I consented. I said yes. My voice did not shake that time. The judge signed the adoption decree. The clerk stamped it. The sound of the stamp felt louder than it should have. Afterward, Ben handed me a certified copy. "Your name is Adeline Callahan now," he said, "legally, if you want it." I looked at the paper. I felt gratitude and grief at the same time. "We can change everything else later," he added. "This is just protection." Protection, not replacement. I did not know until years later that he had also kept a certified copy of the termination order from 2010 in his safe. He believed in documentation, in receipts, in proof. The first time I saw that order, I was 25 and already working in the company full-time. He showed it to me quietly in his office, like he was handing me a shield. "They made a choice," he said. "You do not have to carry the guilt of it." That was the twist I never saw coming. They hadn't just asked me to leave, they had formalized it. They had signed away the right to call themselves my parents so that I could not legally ask them anything, and so they would not be required to provide me anything. They called it stability. I later understood it as convenience. I enrolled at the University of Washington in the fall of 2011, technically still Whitmore on my transcripts. By the time I graduated in 2015 with a degree in finance, my legal documents read Callahan. I chose to keep Whitmore in business because I didn't want to run from the name. I wanted to own it in a way they never had. Conditional love teaches you that you must earn your place. Unconditional love teaches you that you already have one. Monica's love was always measured against my usefulness. Ben's love was quiet and steady. He asked about my classes. He showed up to presentations. He never asked me to give something up so someone else could feel bigger. The day I signed my first lease as a junior analyst at Whitmore Commercial Holdings, I wrote my name carefully at the bottom of the page, Addie Whitmore. I wasn't erasing the past. I was taking control of it by owning it in a way they never had. By the time the adoption decree was filed and sealed in King County, I understood something else too. They had signed papers to make my absence legal. They had tried to turn abandonment into order. They thought paperwork would close the door behind me. Instead, it gave Ben the authority to open a different one. Chapter 3. He did not open it for me. He stood beside me while I learned how to turn the handle myself. My first year at the University of Washington felt like stepping into a world that ran on numbers instead of moods. I liked that. Numbers did not change because someone felt slighted. They did not withdraw affection if you disappointed them. They either balanced or they did not. Ben insisted I understand every document I signed. When I filled out financial aid forms, he sat across from me at the kitchen table in his Ballard townhouse. "Read it twice," he would say, "then ask what it means." He did not correct me immediately. He let me struggle, then nudged. By sophomore year, I was working part-time in the accounting department at Whitmore Commercial Holdings. At first, I handled data entry and reconciliations. It was not glamorous work, but I loved the rhythm of it. Lease terms, rent escalations, maintenance reserves. I began to see buildings as living spreadsheets. In 2015, I graduated with a degree in finance. In 2017, I passed the CPA exam after months of studying until my eyes burned. The day the results came in, I stood in the kitchen staring at the screen. I passed. Ben looked up from his coffee and smiled without surprise. Of course you did. I did not hear pride in his voice. I heard expectation. Not the kind that suffocates, but the kind that says, you are capable. I moved into a full-time role at Whitmore Commercial Holdings that same year. I learned the business from the ground up. Vendor contracts, tenant disputes, insurance renewals, the unglamorous work that kept cash flow steady. By 2020, our portfolio sat at roughly $22 million. We owned medical office spaces in Bellevue, retail storefronts in Ballard, and a mixed-use building in Capitol Hill that had nearly gone bankrupt before Ben bought it in the early 90s. I did not inherit stability. I helped build it. In early 2022, I made my first real mistake. One of our largest tenants was a regional chain of medical clinics occupying 2 floors in our Bellevue property. Their lease had an escalation clause that allowed for a 5% increase after 5 years. The market supported it. The numbers justified it. I enforced it. 2 weeks later, the clinic's director called. "We are considering relocating," she said. "Your increase puts us above our projected operating margin." I told her the contract was clear. She replied that contracts did not treat patients. I hung up feeling victorious. I had upheld the terms. I had protected revenue. 3 days later, she sent notice of intent to vacate at the end of the lease. When I told Nina, she did not raise her voice. She simply looked at me for a long second. "We do not win by being technically right," she said. "We win by keeping the building full." We spent 2 weeks renegotiating. I sat across from the clinic's director again, this time listening instead of citing clauses. We adjusted the escalation slightly, offered a tenant improvement allowance tied to renewal length. They stayed. Afterward, Nina handed me the revised contract. "Read every line again," she said, "and remember what almost cost us 2 floors." That was when I understood that financial independence was not just about control, it was about judgment. In January 2023, at 30 years old, I became CFO. Ben called me into his office. He did not make a speech. "You know the books better than anyone here," he said. "It is time." I felt pride and pressure in equal measure. Being CFO meant the numbers were not just lines. They were livelihoods. They were payroll. They were promises. By early 2025, our portfolio had grown to approximately $28.4 million, with occupancy hovering around 94%. I knew those figures because I reviewed them personally each quarter. I did not delegate final oversight. I read every major contract. I tracked every large expense. "Never hand over financial control blindly," Ben had said once after I signed a vendor agreement without double-checking a termination clause. Even if you trust someone, understand what you are trusting them with. I applied that principle everywhere. Lawyers drafted documents, accountants prepared reports, but I read them. While my world was expanding, another was quietly contracting. In late 2022, Thomas invested $240,000 in a pre-construction condominium project in Miami. He believed it was a sure return. By mid-2023, the developer filed for bankruptcy. The project collapsed. I learned this not from him, but from a cousin who still lived in Portland and had a talent for repeating what she shouldn't. "They're upside down on the house," she told me. He refinanced to cover the loss. In 2023, Thomas took out a home equity line on the Portland house. Lauren and her husband Caleb had mounting credit card debt. Caleb's sales commissions fluctuated. Interest rates were climbing. I did not reach out. They did not reach out to me. But I could see the shape of the pressure building. It was not just resentment that brought them back into my orbit in 2025. It was math. There was another detail from the past that lingered quietly. In 2009, before I moved to Seattle, Ben consulted with a local attorney about restructuring his estate. He mentioned it once at dinner years later. "Met with a man named Daniel Crowley, sharp but not my kind of fit." He never elaborated. At the time, it meant nothing to me. Later, when I heard Daniel's name in connection with the contest, I remembered that comment. Not my kind of fit. By 2024, Ben was 66 and still coming into the office most mornings. He pretended to dislike the attention when tenants greeted him by name, but he always lingered a little longer in those conversations than he needed to. In June 2024, he called me into his office and closed the door. He looked tired in a way that went beyond a long week. "I went to the doctor," he said. "They found something. Congestive heart failure, advanced stage, manageable for a time, not reversible." The word time rearranged itself in my head. He did not dramatize it. He did not speak in whispers. He pulled a folder from his desk. "I updated the will," he said. "June 2024. It's clear, it's tight, it anticipates noise." "Noise?" I said. "You mean them?" He did not nod. He did not have to. "Everything has been prepared," he said. "You do not need to negotiate with anyone for what is already decided." I sat there staring at the folder. "You think they'll contest it?" He looked at me carefully. "I think money changes the way some people remember history." I wanted to tell him that I did not care about the money, that I only cared about him, but that would have been a lie. I cared about both. The buildings were not just revenue, they were the life we had built together. He leaned back in his chair. "Whatever happens," he said, "you read everything. You do not sign anything you do not understand, and you do not give away control to make someone comfortable." That was the last time he mentioned the will directly. He continued coming into the office through the fall. By early 2025, he moved slower. Nina began taking more of the operational burden. I handled the financials. We adjusted schedules quietly so he wouldn't feel sidelined. On February 28, 2025, Ben passed away at Swedish Medical Center. In the days that followed, I handled calls, paperwork, condolences. I kept moving because stopping would have meant collapsing. 3 days later, Monica called for the first time in years. "I heard about Ben," she said. "We should come up. We're family." I did not correct her. I told her the memorial had already taken place. There was a pause. Then she asked about the will. The door Ben had opened for me years earlier had led to stability, to competence, to control. But it had also led here, to a room in Seattle where old signatures and new numbers would collide. And I knew, sitting in his office after the diagnosis in June 2024, watching him close that folder with quiet certainty, that he had already prepared for the collision long before it began. Chapter 4. The collision came faster than I expected. Ben died on February 28, 2025. I was holding his hand when the monitors flattened into a steady line. The room smelled like antiseptic and quiet surrender. I did not cry until I walked into the parking garage and realized there would be no more folders on his desk waiting for me. The memorial was small, exactly how he wanted it. Business partners, a few old friends. No drama, no spectacle. 3 days later, on March 5th, Nina walked into my office without knocking. "You need to see this," she said. She set a printed email on my desk. It was from Evelyn. "Daniel Crowley has filed a will contest in King County Superior Court. Grounds alleged are undue influence. He has also submitted a petition requesting a temporary freeze of certain estate assets pending review." My first reaction was not anger, it was calculation. "How exposed are we?" I asked. Nina crossed her arms. "The credit line is already being questioned. We have one lender asking for written confirmation that authority remains intact, and the Bellevue Clinic sent another email this morning." I leaned back in my chair. "Show me." The email from the clinic director was polite but cautious. "Given the recent legal filings, we need reassurance that ownership stability will not impact our lease terms or services." Stability, that word again. By noon, 2 separate brokers had called Nina asking if the company was in trouble. Word traveled fast in Seattle real estate, faster than facts. I called Evelyn. "How bad is it?" I asked. It is noise, she said, but strategic noise. A petition to freeze assets is evaluated on likelihood of success and risk to the estate. If a judge believes there is a credible chance the contest will succeed and that assets could be dissipated, a freeze can be granted. Do they have that? I asked. No, she said, they do not, but they are hoping the threat alone pressures you to settle. I closed my eyes. Settle meant pay them to go away. Settle meant legitimizing their narrative. Evelyn continued, "We will file a formal response immediately. We will include the 2010 termination order, the 2012 adoption decree, and documentation showing the will was executed with independent counsel and witnesses. There is no evidence of undue influence, and there is strong argument that they lack standing." Standing, I repeated. They voluntarily terminated parental rights in 2010, she said. Legally, that matters. It does not automatically bar them from filing, but it weakens their claims substantially. After I hung up, I stared at the skyline outside my office window. I had spent years building systems that did not depend on anyone's approval, and yet here I was, feeling 17 again, waiting to see if someone else would decide my fate. That night, I did not sleep. I replayed every conversation I had with Ben in the last year, every email, every time he had asked me to review a draft of the will. Had I said anything that could be twisted into influence? Had I been too present, too involved? At 3 in the morning, I opened my laptop and reread the estate documents, every clause, every signature, every witness line. Ben had insisted on independent counsel. He had insisted on 2 witnesses with no financial interest. He had insisted that I not be in the room when final revisions were discussed. He had anticipated noise. The next morning, I met with Dr. Melissa Hayes. I had started seeing her after my promotion to CFO in 2023, mostly to untangle the old knots that still tightened when Monica's name appeared on my phone. Now I sat on her couch with a court filing in my bag. "They're saying I manipulated him," I said. "Do you believe that?" she asked. "No." "Then what are you afraid of?" she said. I thought about it. Not losing the money, not exactly. I am afraid of them rewriting the story, of making me look like the villain. She nodded. Revenge is about making someone hurt. Justice is about restoring what is true. Which one are you chasing? I did not answer immediately. "I want the truth on record," I said finally. "Then act in alignment with that," she said, "not with fear." By Friday, March 7th, the rumors had spread. A broker at a networking event asked Nina if we were restructuring. A competitor casually mentioned hearing about a family dispute. I called a brief executive meeting. "We are not settling quietly," I said. "We are responding with facts. Every lender receives a written statement from Evelyn confirming the legal posture. Every tenant receives reassurance. No one panics." George looked at me carefully. "That's the right call," he said. "Panic invites predators." That afternoon, Evelyn forwarded me a draft of our response to the petition freeze. It outlined 3 primary points. First, the likelihood of success on the contest was low because the will was executed with independent counsel and proper witnesses, and there was no evidence of undue influence. Second, there was no risk of asset dissipation. The portfolio was professionally managed with audited financial statements and no unusual transfers. Third, the petitioners had weakened standing due to the 2010 termination of parental rights and subsequent adoption. She called me later that evening. "There's something else," she said. "What?" I reviewed old correspondence between Ben and outside counsel. In 2009, he met with Daniel Crowley regarding estate planning. He chose not to retain him. I went still. I remember that. If Daniel reviewed confidential financial information at that time, there could be a conflict of interest in representing your biological parents against this estate, she said. "We are investigating further." The twist did not explode. It settled in quietly. Another thread to pull. On March 12th, the court issued a brief order. The petition to freeze assets was denied. The judge's reasoning was concise. The petitioners failed to demonstrate a likelihood of success on the merits or a risk of irreparable harm to the estate. No freeze would be imposed. I read the order twice before I allowed myself to exhale. The contest itself remained pending, but the buildings would not be frozen. Payroll would run, renovations would continue, lenders would see that the court had not flinched. Nina stepped into my office when the news came in. "We're clear for now," she said. "For now," I repeated. That night I slept 4 uninterrupted hours for the first time since Ben died. Monica called the next afternoon. "You don't have to drag this through court. We can resolve this privately." "Resolve what?" I asked. She paused. "The estate, the misunderstanding." I pictured her kitchen in Portland, a same one where she had told me I was good at adapting. "You filed a contest. That's not a misunderstanding." Her voice hardened just slightly. "We are your parents. You signed away that role in 2010, I said. Silence. Then she shifted tactics. "You know your father is under financial strain." There it was. Not grief, not reconciliation, strain. I did not respond. After I hung up, I drove to the office and walked through each floor of our downtown property. I greeted tenants. I asked maintenance about a leaking pipe. I stood in the lobby and watched people move in and out of a building that had nothing to do with my past and everything to do with my present. This was not about revenge. It was about control. Evelyn called that evening. "The court has scheduled the formal reading of the will on March 10th. Given the filed contest, it will be conducted in a structured setting. I recommend we proceed publicly as Ben intended." Public meant witnesses. Public meant no quiet settlement. Public meant whatever truth came out would stay out. "Are you certain?" she asked. I thought about Dr. Hayes, about justice versus revenge. "Yes," I said. "We proceed." When I hung up, I sat alone in my office for a long moment. The skyline outside was dark, lights blinking against the water. Ben had closed that folder in June with quiet certainty. He had known this might come. Now it was coming, and I was done negotiating for my place at the table. Chapter 5. The room felt smaller now than it had a week ago, as if the walls themselves understood that something irreversible was about to be said out loud. Evelyn's voice carried evenly across the conference table. She began by restating what had already unsettled them: the portfolio, 14 commercial properties in Seattle and Bellevue, approximately $28.4 million in valuation as of January 2025, 94% occupancy. Numbers did not lie, they did not tremble, they did not soften for family. Thomas shifted in his chair again. "This is unnecessary," he said. "We are aware of the assets." Evelyn did not look at him. "The will further specifies," she continued, "that Thomas Whitmore shall receive no distribution from the estate due to long-standing estrangement and an outstanding personal loan extended in 2002 in the amount of $80,000. No record of repayments exists." Thomas leaned forward, face flushed. "That loan was informal," he said, "between brothers." George Patel spoke for the first time since the reading resumed. "The documentation reflects a promissory note. It was not informal." Thomas's jaw tightened. Monica placed a hand lightly on his arm, a gesture that looked supportive but carried warning. Daniel cleared his throat. "We dispute that characterization," he said. "And again, the contest alleges undue influence. Exclusion of immediate family is itself suspicious." Evelyn lifted her eyes. "Suspicion is not evidence," she said. "The will was executed with independent counsel in June 2024. 2 disinterested witnesses were present. The testator was evaluated as competent. There is no medical or documentary basis for undue influence." Her tone did not rise. It did not need to. She turned the page. The document references court records from September 2010, Multnomah County Family Court, voluntary termination of parental rights signed by Monica Whitmore and Thomas Whitmore. The air changed. Monica's face went pale, then pink, then pale again. Evelyn continued without hesitation. The order was reviewed and approved by a presiding judge. The termination was entered into official record. In May 2012, King County Superior Court finalized the adoption of Adeline by Benjamin Callahan. A certified copy of both orders is retained in estate records. Daniel's pen stopped moving. Thomas looked at Monica as if she had betrayed him simply by letting the words exist in the room. "You are misrepresenting context," Daniel said quickly. "The termination was intended to facilitate guardianship and educational stability." Evelyn nodded slightly. "The language of the order is clear. Parental rights were voluntarily terminated. The adoption was finalized 2 years later. These facts are not interpretive." I felt something inside me loosen. Not triumph, not vindication, just alignment. For years, the story had been told as if I had run away, as if I had been dramatic, difficult, ungrateful. Now the record spoke for itself. Monica's voice broke the silence. "Addie," she said softly, "we were trying to give you a better life." I looked at her. "You signed the papers," I said. She swallowed. "We thought it was temporary." "It was not written that way," Evelyn said. Daniel leaned forward again. "Even if termination occurred, that does not eliminate the possibility of undue influence in later years. My clients maintain that Mr. Callahan was isolated from his biological family." Evelyn turned another page. "The will contains a no contest clause. Any individual who challenges the validity of this document and fails shall receive no distribution from the estate." The words landed cleanly. Daniel's expression shifted, not to shock, but to calculation. Monica blinked. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means that if the court determines the contest lacks merit, no distribution will be awarded to the contesting parties." Thomas exhaled sharply. "So this is intimidation," he said. "It is standard estate protection," Evelyn answered. The room was quiet again, but the tension had thickened. Evelyn continued. "The will further specifies that Adeline Callahan is the sole beneficiary of the estate." There it was. No ambiguity, no shared percentages, no quiet trust to be divided later. Sole beneficiary. I did not look at Monica. I did not look at Thomas. I looked straight ahead at the skyline beyond the glass. Daniel spoke after a moment. "We intend to proceed with the contest." "You are entitled to proceed," Evelyn said. "However, given the documented termination of parental rights, the valid adoption decree, the proper execution of the will, and the absence of evidence supporting undue influence, the likelihood of success appears limited." She paused. "There is an additional matter." Daniel's head tilted slightly. "That is speculative," he said sharply. "It is under review," Evelyn replied. "If appropriate, we will submit documentation to the Washington State Bar Association." Monica's eyes darted between them, confused. "What is she saying?" she asked Daniel. He did not answer her immediately. Thomas pushed back slightly in his chair. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We are defending our family." No one in the room rushed to agree. Dr. Rachel Kim sat very still, hands folded. George Patel looked down at the table, then back up, expression neutral but unflinching. The silence stretched. Then Monica did something I had not prepared for. She looked directly at me. "Addie," she said, her voice lower now, stripped of performance. "I'm sorry." The word hung there. She did not say for what. Not for the porch, not for the paperwork, not for the years of silence. Just sorry. I studied her face. It was not dramatic, it was not tearful, it was cautious. "Sorry for what?" I asked. She hesitated. "For how things turned out." That was as close as she would come to admitting anything. I felt the old ache rise again, the part of me that once would have reached across the table and accepted that half apology just to end the tension. But clarity had replaced hunger. I nodded once. "I understand," I said. It was not forgiveness, it was not reconciliation, it was acknowledgement. Thomas stood up abruptly. "This is not over," he said to Daniel. Daniel gathered his papers with controlled movements. "We will see you in court," to Evelyn. "You are welcome to," Evelyn replied. Monica remained seated for a second longer, eyes on me as if trying to read something I was not offering. Then she stood too. No one reached out to shake their hands. No one tried to soften the exit. They walked out of the conference room together, the sound of the door closing behind them quieter than I expected. The room did not erupt. There was no applause, no congratulations. George cleared his throat gently. "The documentation is solid," he said. "You did nothing wrong." Dr. Kim nodded. "Benjamin spoke often about integrity," she said. "He would be proud of how this was handled." Nina let out a breath she had been holding. "We still have work to do," she said, "but this is a good day." Evelyn closed the folder slowly. "The will stands as written," she said. "The contest remains pending, but its foundation is weak. We proceed as planned." One by one, they gathered their things and left the room. When the door clicked shut for the last time, I was alone. The skyline stretched beyond glass, gray and steady. I did not feel victorious. I felt light. Not because I had won anything yet, not because the contest was over, but because the truth had been spoken in a room full of witnesses. I placed my hands flat on the table where theirs had rested minutes before. For the first time in years, I did not feel like I was waiting to be chosen. I was simply standing where I belonged. Chapter 6. The quiet that followed did not feel empty. It felt earned. In April 2025, the court issued its ruling on the will contest. The petition was dismissed. The language in the order was restrained and clinical, but to me it felt like a door sealing shut. The judge wrote that the petitioners failed to provide credible evidence of undue influence. The will had been executed with independent counsel and proper witnesses. There was no indication of coercion, isolation, or diminished capacity. The termination of parental rights in 2010 and the finalized adoption in 2012 significantly weakened the petitioner's standing, though the dismissal rested primarily on the absence of proof. It was not emotional. It was procedural. And it was enough. I read the ruling twice at my desk. Outside my office window, Seattle moved as it always did. Ferries crossing the water, traffic building on I-5, people walking into buildings I owned and managed. Nothing looked different, but everything felt steadier. I forwarded the ruling to Nina first. She stepped into my office 10 minutes later without knocking. "It is done," she said. "The contest is done," I replied. "Probate is still moving." She nodded. 4 to 6 months, she said. "Administrative. No drama." Within hours, our primary lender sent written confirmation that the revolving credit line remained intact. Another bank requested an updated copy of the ruling for their records, and then followed with a brief note of continued confidence. Confidence is a currency most people underestimate. The Bellevue Clinic signed a 5-year renewal in early May. The director shook my hand in the lobby and said, "We needed to see stability. Now we see it." By the end of summer, the whispers in the commercial real estate circles quieted. The brokers who had once called Nina with polite concern now called to ask about potential acquisitions. In December 2025, our internal report showed a 12% increase in portfolio value compared to the prior year. It was not explosive growth. It was disciplined growth. Occupancy remained at 94%. Cash flow projections were stable. Reserves were strong. The buildings had not flinched. In July 2025, Evelyn called again. "We have filed the complaint with the Washington State Bar Association regarding Daniel Crowley's prior consultation with Benjamin in 2009, she said. "We are providing documentation of the meeting and correspondence." I listened quietly. "Do you want to proceed publicly if they inquire?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Transparency is consistent with our position." In December 2025, the bar issued a formal reprimand. It was not dramatic. No courtroom confrontation, no public apology. but it was documented. A notation attached to his professional record regarding a failure to adequately assess potential conflict of interest. Justice does not always arrive in headlines. Sometimes it arrives in footnotes. I did not gloat. I did not call anyone to share the news. I simply archived the letter in a digital folder labeled Closed Matters. Monica did not contact me again after the contest was dismissed. Thomas did not either. The silence was almost clinical. Then, in July 2025, an envelope arrived at my office with the Portland return address written in careful, familiar handwriting. Lauren. I carried it home before opening it. 80, it began. I should have said something years ago. I did not because I was afraid of losing my place. I see now that silence costs more than speaking would have. She did not defend our parents. She did not argue about the will. She did not mention money. She wrote about the porch, about remembering the suitcases, about pretending she believed the story that I had chosen to leave. I sat on my couch reading the letter twice, then a third time. In August, I agreed to a phone call. We scheduled it for a Sunday afternoon. 15 minutes, I told her in a brief text beforehand. When she answered, her voice sounded older, not weaker, just less certain. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We talked about her children first, about school schedules and soccer practice. Ordinary things. It felt surreal to speak about ordinary things with someone who had been part of something so sharp. Then she said, "I did not know they filed the termination that week. I found out much later." I believed her. Not because I needed to, because her voice did not carry the strain of defense. "I was a kid too," she said. "I thought if I kept quiet, everything would stay stable." I breathed slowly. "Silence protects the powerful," I said. "It does not protect the rest of us." "I know," she replied. There was a pause. "I'm not asking you for anything," she added quickly. "I just wanted you to hear that from me." "If we talk again," I said, "there are conditions." "Of course." "We do not discuss the estate. We do not discuss money. You do not use me to communicate with Mom or Dad. If that changes, I step away." She did not argue. She agreed immediately. Boundaries spoken clearly do not require volume. We ended the call at 14 minutes and 30 seconds. I did not feel reunited. I felt balanced. In September 2025, we officially launched the Callahan STEM Grant in partnership with Seattle Children's Foundation. The conference room was filled with high school seniors and their families, nervous smiles, cheap suits, hope. 5 students each received $8,000 toward tuition in science and engineering programs. When I stepped to the front to speak, I kept it simple. I talked about preparation, about reading what you sign, about understanding your own worth before someone else tries to define it. After the ceremony, one of the students approached me. "I didn't think people like me had a shot," she said. "You do," I answered. "It just takes persistence." As she walked away clutching her award letter, I felt something settle inside me that no court ruling could provide. Legacy is not about what you win. It's about what you build after the fight ends. By November 2025, probate was nearly complete. Assets transferred cleanly, titles updated, accounts closed and reopened in my name. The administrative side of grief is underrated. It forces you to move forward even when your emotions lag behind. I visited Ben's grave on a gray afternoon in early 2026. I stood there without flowers, without a speech prepared. "Everything is handled," I said quietly, "just like you wanted." The wind moved through the trees. The city hummed in the distance. I did not ask him if he was proud. I knew the answer. Monica and Thomas remained absent from my life. I did not search public records to see if their financial situation improved. I did not ask relatives for updates. Curiosity faded when necessity disappeared. There's a strange freedom in not needing to monitor the people who once defined you. Evening, in early 2026, I returned to the same conference room at Columbia Center where the will had been read. The building was quiet. The city lights reflected against the glass. I placed my hands on the table where we had all sat months earlier. I thought about the girl on the porch in Portland, hugging her suitcase while the streetlight flickered on and no one came out to sit beside her. I thought about the folder Ben closed in June 2024 with quiet certainty. I thought about the way Monica said sorry without naming the harm. Boundaries are not revenge. They are structure. They hold up what matters and keep out what doesn't. Forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. It can exist privately without reopening doors that were closed for a reason. I did not win because I was louder. I won because I was prepared, because I read the fine print, because I refused to trade stability for comfort. If you ever reach a point where you no longer need someone's approval to breathe freely, you stand at a choice. Do you reopen the door because you can, or do you keep it closed because you have finally built something solid on your side? There is no universal answer, only the one that lets you sleep at night. If this story resonated with you, if you have faced a moment where you had to choose between peace and proximity, I would love to know what you chose and why. And if you want to stay for more stories about rebuilding after betrayal, about turning paperwork into power and pain into legacy, stay with me.